Good afternoon, Nexus. A bit of energy. I first would like to thank the Nexus team for putting this topic on the agenda. But before we start the core of the content, and I let also the panelists introduce themselves, I would like to share one definition, maybe one example, and also one promise. So, starting with the definitions of the purpose of this conversation, we will define emerging technologies as technologies that can be old or new, but for which the full potential of development or application has not been realized. So now the example, and I will take AI as an example. I think all of us in this room heard for hours, months, even years, everything about AI, and we clearly see that the potential in front of us is much bigger than what we have achieved. If we look at how it is contributing to the SDGs, and for example the SDG 7, which is affordable and clean energy, one can argue that it has a positive and a negative impact. Positive because it's a central element in, for example, power grids to balance the consumption and the production of renewable energy, but also negative because the more digital technologies you put in those networks, the higher the consumption of those technologies. So now comes the promise, we won't talk about AI anymore in this panel. So let's go to the panel, and if we can start with the question on why is sustainability important for you or your organization, and also maybe introduce yourself at the same time. Merete, let's start with you.
Yes, thank you very much, Ronan. I would just quickly say that my name is Merete Clausen, and I'm from the European Commission. And as you know, the European Commission is a very big organization that covers a lot of things. And our policy for sustainability, the Green Deal, is, as you very well know, one of the most hotly debated topics at the moment. It's a plan to integrate sustainability into all aspects of our economies, from energy, industry, over transport to agriculture and bioeconomy. But we must figure out how to do it without increasing red tape and burden. We have to do it in the simplest possible manner. We have to do it so that it becomes a natural way of our living and our way of doing business, a natural part of that. So, since I'm from the part of the Commission that deals with industry, entrepreneurship, SMEs, and the internal market, I'm going to zoom in just on one aspect, one dimension of sustainability, which is how we can invest in decarbonizing our industry, because we know it is a major contributor to CO2 emissions. And the industry's challenges are very much related to the cost of energy, but also to the cost of the transition to renewable energy. And to help them, we need to massively roll out the green tech. We need to roll out solar, wind, hydrogen, and so on in Europe. But we also need to ensure that we are more self-sufficient in producing the green tech components in Europe. And this is part of our energy security strategy to reduce the dependencies on third countries who are not always like-minded. And we aim to invest so much in strategic green technology in Europe that we will be able to cover 40% of our own needs in 2030. And that is what sustainability also means to me, that we turn this Green Deal into a true transformation strategy for all the regions of the EU, for all the sectors, and a strategy that at the same time creates business opportunities for also the smallest businesses.
Thanks a lot for your introduction, and up to you now, Chris. Let's maybe present yourself also.
Great, thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, my name's Chris. I'm from HSBC. I work in our group sustainability team covering climate change as a topic for the group all around the bank. Similarly, a very large institution and very complex. I'm going to really zero in on one of the SDGs that was touched on briefly earlier, so climate action. And really, a phrase that we use and is sort of adopted is this phrase about transitioning to net zero. Net zero is the destination we need to get to. And it's incredibly transformational, what needs to happen to reach net zero, it's going to impact every sector of the economy. It's going to impact all of the companies at this conference today. And so for us, that means all of our clients in all of our markets, and for HSBC ourselves as well. So we're really sort of leaning in to the transition to net zero. We think we have an important role to play there. Yes, some of that is about the opportunity to help finance our clients as they transition. Just to give you one number, somewhere around about $155 trillion is needed in finance between now and 2050 for the transition to net zero. And that's just in the markets that we happen to serve. So an incredible amount of finance and capital is needed to be moved into these solutions. But there's also risk. That's a real key motivation for us as well. If the global economy doesn't meet that, then there's risks to our business, our clients, our stakeholders. Earlier this year, we released our transition plan, and it was the first time we brought together all of our commitments. We've got a commitment to be a net zero bank by 2050, be net zero in our own operations by 2030. That's our buildings, our transport. And then finally, aiming to provide $750 billion to $1 trillion of financing to support net zero between now and 2030. And much of that is directed at the technologies that are being talked about today, that whether it's sort of on the hardware side, we're talking about electric vehicles, batteries, or on the software and digital side as well.
Exactly. So let's go to the exam question now. So do you believe that emerging technologies are obstacles or catalysts for sustainability? But you have to answer in one word. Then you can explain. Let's continue with you, Chris.
Thanks. One word, a catalyst. We think they're a catalyst. And let me explain why. 35% of the emission reductions needed by 2050 are going to come from technologies that are not yet at a commercial scale. Over a third of the solutions are still needing R&D, incubation, innovation to enable them to be deployed at the scale we need. So we know that. It's one of the reasons last year we launched a $1 billion venture tech fund. And the venture is really important here because it's all about supporting early stage entrepreneurs, innovators, so they can scale these technologies. We've seen if you can get the enabling conditions right, if we can get the policies right, the frameworks right, the acceleration and deployment of solar and wind, how they come down in costs can really be achieved. And now we need the same with this next kind of wave of technologies that are needed to deliver a net zero transition. And maybe just to give you a couple of examples from HSBC, we've been partnering with something called the Breakthrough Energy Catalyst. It's a really exciting public-private partnership to develop these emerging technologies right around the world that are going to be critical to delivering. Maybe that's clean hydrogen or direct air capture plants that just physically suck the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and then you can store it under the ground. And that works by providing catalytic financing and expertise to these entrepreneurial, innovative technology companies that are looking for support to scale. Another is that our asset management division has a climate tech venture capital fund, again, looking to raise somewhere around $200 million to really support move institutional capital into climate technology and technology solutions. So, we think they can be a real catalyst. They're needed. They're that 35% at least. We're sort of leaning in with others because we think there's real opportunity to support these organizations and these technologies.
Thank you. I think your position is clear. Now I'm turning to you, Merete. One word and then a few words of explanation.
Catalyst. Obviously, because the benefits largely outweigh the challenges and the concerns. And let me stay a little bit in the area of the renewable energies and renewable energy innovation, because this is an area where we really see that technological developments are rapidly lowering not only the greenhouse gas emissions, but also the costs of the technologies, which, of course, helps to make this clean energy more accessible. And some of the things we have out on our radar is smart grid technologies and energy storage technologies, because when renewable energy is produced, it needs to get into the grid. And there are risk of transition losses, which smart grid and storage technologies can help solve. And they also help smoothen fluctuation in the generation of the renewable energy. And I could mention many other things. Farming is another area where new technologies can help. IoT, sensors, AI algorithms, data analytics, which help allow a more precise monitoring of soil conditions, of water usage, of crop health. So all of this we need in the Commission also to be at the forefront of. We need to be able to identify which are the deep tech and breakthrough innovations that are emergent from the science base and could create new value propositions for projects that people such as Chris could be interested in, and also can disrupt existing markets. So if we can predict these emerging technologies, we can also prepare and adapt our EU programs to promote and to finance them. We have a flagship deep tech funding program in the EU, the European Innovation Council. It's part of our research program, the Horizon Europe, and it supports the most talented and the most visionary European researchers and entrepreneurs with over 10 billion of funding in the current budget framework. And this is all the way from the groundbreaking idea to success in the EU and the global markets. So I think we are really supporting where we can and marrying our EU budget fund with the private funds. That's where we want to go. I think these private-public partnerships are the models of the future, and I predict that we will have more and more of them. To date, the European Innovation Council has financed more than 700 projects, and we have equity stakes in deep tech companies for about 1.2 billion euros, and all that in cooperation with the private sector, and we will finance many more.
Thank you. It's really interesting to see how public and private sector complement themselves and also collaborate together. A bit continuing on what you were saying, so we are talking about emerging technologies. So we know the road will be bumpy, there will be obstacles. So what can you do, what can your organization do, what can we do to overcome those challenges?
I will mention two main challenges. There are many more, obviously, but we don't have time to go through all of them. But one is the lack of funding, and the second one is complexity of regulation that I also mentioned in the beginning. We have recently adopted a Net Zero Industry Act that covers the most strategic of the green technologies. And this is an example of how we try to tackle the complexity of the regulation. For instance, by setting deadlines and providing one-stop shops in the member states for someone who wants to obtain an authorization to produce green technologies, to put up a solar power plant or to put up a battery factory. And you should check it out because it's really a model to build on also for other areas than the key green strategic technologies that we are covering now. And I also already mentioned the European Innovation Council as an example of how we tackle the lack of funding. But we have other programs that provide support to emerging technologies. We have our Invest EU program that supports more mature key technologies. Again, sharing the risk with the private and public investors that we can get to come with us. And we also have the Digital Europe program specifically for AI, for high-performance computing, for cybersecurity, and so on. And all these provide funding. And finally, we also have our recently adopted AI Act that I'm sure many of you have heard about. It's part of a wider package of policy measures to support the development of trustworthy AI and aims to ensure that technologies are used in a safe way, in a transparent way, and respect fundamental rights such as the right to privacy. So I wanted actually to quote something that I heard recently from a wise person sitting here to the right of me, which is Amara's law, that says that people tend to overestimate the short-term impact of new technologies while underestimating the long-term effects. And that dovetails very, very nicely with what Chris just said, because we know that most of or at least a good part of the CO2 emissions that we need to reduce to reach climate neutrality by 2050 would come from green technologies that are now in the development stage, in the demonstration state, in the very early stages. So that means that what many of you in the audience here are doing today may seem to move slowly, there are obstacles, there are challenges, but it will have long-term effects. So don't lose faith, let's keep doing it.
Thank you, Merete. Chris, same questions. So what can you do, what can we do to overcome the obstacles?
Thanks. I'm going to build on the collaboration point in a second, but perhaps one very sort of immediate and very practical thing. As HSBC took a look at the net zero transition, what that meant in terms of opportunities and how we were going to need to change and evolve how we supported our clients, we realized that that also required us to think about the skills and capacity that we had. So I think one thing that all companies will need to do is to make sure that they have the right expertise, in-house to enable them to really take advantage of this net zero transition. So for us, for example, yes, we've got world-class finance experts and advisory experts, but we've also been hiring leaders and world-leading experts in climate change, in green hydrogen, in renewable power, etc. So that's sort of one very practical thing. Just think about the skills that you need for tomorrow to really lean into this and help unlock all these new solutions. The other point really, yes, is about collaboration. And we've heard there are a number of series of challenges, but I think one of the challenges is that we need to unlock these new and emerging technologies at a pace and at a scale that is unprecedented, because that's the challenge in front of us to transition to net zero. It's about systems change, it's about whole transformation change. And so in our transition plan that I mentioned earlier, we spoke about what we can do as a bank, but the collaboration point is really key. It's about we're only going to get there by collaborating across the public sector, the private sector, with civil society. We have, as I mentioned earlier, around some of the existing technologies in certain markets that have been able to really thrive already. That's because the enabling conditions were there that enabled the private sector to sort of be unleashed and to support them. So it's only by working together that we can really do that. So if there's one sort of takeaway, it's really about how can we all together lean into this and collaborate. So partnerships were a key theme at the COP, the climate conference last year. I don't know if anyone else was there who was in the room, and they were a key theme for us as well. And I think one of the things that emerged there, whether that was the International Renewable Energies Energy Transition Accelerator or a new Global Climate Finance Center, lots of momentum and enthusiasm and engagement and real action now around bringing private finance and public finance together to really lean into this, which is really exciting. And both of those are targeting unlocking renewable technologies and these new emerging technologies. Maybe the last thing, just as an example, to sort of get us back into the digital space, is a collaboration that we announced earlier this year with Google Cloud. So HSBC and Google Cloud, if you're a company on Google Cloud and you're part of their Sustainability Ready program, you have the opportunity to access HSBC's climate technology finance team and experts to help them grow and scale. And I think that's sort of an example of the sort of digital space and the finance sector coming together to help scale organizations that are trying to themselves grow these new technologies.
Thanks a lot, Chris. We are coming to the end of this panel, and I think the answer to the question is quite clear. Emerging technology will be catalysts to reach sustainability objective. The combination of the private and the public sector will be key, each on his side, but also together in partnership. And of course, having the Commission and the public sector being there to put the framework around those technologies and making sure that we use them safely will be instrumental. So I would like to thank you for your insight and sharing your perspective today. And with that, I will hand over to Avanti. Thank you all for listening.